And good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch. This is Politics Unplugged, and the House of Representatives has a lot on its plate right now with a federal budget crisis and military aid to Ukraine and Israel hanging in the balance. And of course, there is that race to elect a new Speaker of the House. And here to discuss all of this is Congressman Greg Stanton, a Democrat who represents Arizona's 4th Congressional District. Congressman, thank you very much for joining me here today. And let's start off with that Speaker's race. The latest reports that I'm seeing is that Republicans, again, no Republican has enough votes to become the new Speaker. What are you hearing, and what's the impact on the work that you should be doing?
Well, Dennis, for almost 2 weeks now, the United States House of Representatives has not had a Speaker of the House. And while some may think this is sort of palace intrigue or drama or a soap opera, there are some massive implications for the inability of the Republicans, who are in the majority right now, to pick a Speaker to lead the United States Congress. Bills cannot come to the floor unless there is a Speaker of the House. So you mentioned it. We have to support Israel. Over 400 members of Congress has signed a resolution in support of Israel after that horrific and barbaric terrorist attack upon their people. Over 1,200 murdered in the country of our ally Israel. We have to support Ukraine against a horrific invasion by Putin, and defense is important not just for Ukraine but for all of the world, that we stand up to authoritarianism and support countries that share our values. We can't let that violence get further into Europe. We have to support Taiwan as well. That's under increasing threat from China. And we need to do more on border security. None of those things can happen. All of them are at risk. None of them can happen until we get a new Speaker of the House. And so my call to my friends on the other side of the aisle is, if you can't get all the votes among yourselves, reach across the aisle. We're ready to work with you in a bipartisan way. Govern in a different type of way, not from the extreme edges of either of the political parties, but let's govern together from the center. Pick a moderate. You're going to get a lot of Democratic votes to do so, and let's move this country forward.
Yeah, but I mean, Democrats had an opportunity to do something to save House Speaker McCarthy a couple of weeks ago, chose not to do that. What would it take for you to get on board with picking Republicans to put forward a more moderate candidate for someone like you and your caucus to get on board with?
Simply someone that's willing to work in a bipartisan way. Let me give you an example of why Kevin McCarthy was not the right leader for the House of Representatives. We had the National Defense Bill, the bill that pays for the Pentagon, supports the women and men serving in our military. It passed out of the Armed Services Committee with only one negative vote, meaning it was overwhelmingly supported by Democrats and Republicans. What did he do? He allowed the extreme people on the extreme right to put a bunch of amendments on there dealing with banning abortions for people in the military, or ending any diversity programs to try to promote diversity in the military, anti-LGBTQ, purposely so that it chased away Democratic votes to make support of our women and men in the armed forces a partisan thing. You don't do that. That's not leadership. That's the opposite of leadership. We need a leader that will put bills on the floor, the important bills that can gather bipartisan support. That's the right way to lead this country.
And, but it did seem, though, that he was willing to cut better deals, than some of the other names that have been put forward by Republicans. One of the things I keep hearing year after year, session after session, election cycle after election cycle, is people need to work in a bipartisan fashion. You're just saying that to me, but I've seen no effort on your end and your Democrats' end to really make public any kind of gesture to the Republicans out there, like, let's get this done in a bipartisan way. How come?
Let's get this done in a bipartisan way. Let me challenge the premise of the question. We are absolutely ready, willing, and able to support a Republican Speaker of the House. It just has to be someone that's not going to let the extreme right, the Freedom Caucus, the extremists, many of them from Arizona, to run the show or have a check on any bills that get to the floor. We know it's going to be still a center-right leadership, but don't purposely put what I would call culture war amendments on must-pass bills simply to score political points. Act in good faith, work in a bipartisan way, and you will get the Democratic caucus to support you. Right now, it appears that they don't have the ability within just the members of their caucus to get to the requisite number of votes. And so whether they like it or not, they're going to have to operate in a bipartisan way. And oh, by the way, That's good for the United States of America.
Okay, and I want to drill down specifically. Obviously, we've seen, now the conflict between Israel and Gaza. Reports are, we tape on Friday mornings, that Israel is now in Gaza Strip at this point. I mean, the fact that there's no speaker, no leader in the House right now. Give us a little more specifics about how this is affecting the job there and what does need to happen with Congress right now.
Well, the President of the United States is preparing to submit to the United States Congress a proposal to support Israel in this war against Hamas and the terrorists. He is also proposing a package to support Ukraine in their fight against Putin. And he wants to put more resources in for border security, something that's important across the political spectrum and supported across the political spectrum. None of those things can happen unless we have a Speaker of the House. So this is not, as I mentioned, this is not a hypothetical discussion. This is not something that deals with, a soap opera inside the House or inside the Beltway intrigue. This is going to impact critically important national interests of the United States of America. It's going to stop our ability to support our close ally Israel in this fight against terrorism, including replenishment of the Iron Dome, which allows them to shoot down those thousands and thousands of missiles which are pouring down upon the cities and the communities in Israel. We can't do that unless we get a Speaker of the House. And so I would politely suggest to my friends on the other side of the aisle, it may not be easy, but do the right thing. Democrats stand ready to work with you in partnership for the good of America. Get a speaker, and let's get these important priorities on the House and voted upon.
All right, and a final question here. There's still the prospect of a government shutdown looming in November because you guys just passed the stopgap measure recently. What are Democrats specifically, what would you be willing to negotiate on? What issues would you be willing to negotiate on should the speaker be chosen here in the next week or so and negotiate on to get a budget deal done and avoid a government shutdown?
Dennis, one of the reasons why Kevin McCarthy was fired as Speaker of the House is that he actually made a bipartisan agreement with the President of the United States to lessen spending here in Congress. That was to avoid the debt limit issue, so the United States did not default on its debt. The president compromised with them. We put actual budget caps into the proposal. But because of pressure from the extremists of his own party, from members of the Freedom Caucus, who said that that was not a good deal that he made with President Biden, he went against it less than a week. He reneged on his own agreement. That's not leadership. That's the opposite of leadership. So the compromises that need to be made have already been made. And if the new speaker comes in and wants to pass a budget consistent with the agreement that was made, the compromise that was made with the president that we voted on, I voted on, Republicans voted on, it was the extreme elements of either our parties said no to that agreement. It was the moderates in the middle that said yes. If you come forward with budget bills that meet that agreement, the deal's already been made. The compromises have already been made. That's good news for America. Now we just need to implement it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Congressman, for joining us here today. But unfortunately, it's all the time we have, and we'll see you next time you're on the show. And coming up.